Wake of the Bellerephon by T.B. Dahl. Chapter 21. The Factory. The autumn of 1801 came kindly to the fields around Newton Ferrers. This was considerate of it, since the previous years had shown little interest in kindness, and had generally preferred war, bad harvests, debt, and the sort of rain that entered boots with missionary zeal. Now the orchards were heavy, the hedgerows thick with berries, and the fields lay under a low gold light that made even tired land appear forgiven. Carts moved along lanes with loads of apples, barley, turnips, and late hay. Smoke rose from cottages. Men spoke of yield with cautious satisfaction, never too loudly in case Providence overheard and corrected them. William Rowe stood at the edge of his blacksmith shop and wiped sweat from his brow. The forge behind him glowed red, throwing heat through the open doorway and casting long shadows across the yard. Inside, his younger brother Matthew worked the bellows with steady arms, his lean frame already beginning to thicken into the shape common to Rowe men, shoulders made by labor, hands made by iron, backs made by expectation. Hammer struck anvil. Again, again, again. The sound had become the heartbeat of William's life. Once it had belonged to Jenkins, then to the old forge. Now, increasingly, it belonged to him. The land beyond the yard belonged to his family as well, though even after months of papers, seals, signatures, rent arrangements, and Thomas's letters insisting the matter was settled, William still sometimes looked at the fields as if they might accuse him of trespass. The farm, purchased through Thomas's generosity and structured through Eliza's exacting accounts, had moved the Rows from endurance towards security. Security was a dangerous thing. It gave a man time to imagine more. William lifted a small ledger from the workbench and thumbed through its pages. Orders had increased steadily. Ship fittings from Plymouth, horseshoes from local farms, plough repairs, gate hinges, cart irons, tools, brackets, mended kettles and fire grates. Ironwork flowed from his hands into the practical life of the district. Rowe's Forge was spoken of now not merely as convenient, but as excellent. Men who once asked whether Jenkins was at home now asked whether Mr. Rowe could look at a job. William should have been satisfied. Satisfaction, however, had proven a small room. There was a ceiling to what one forge could do, a ceiling to what one man and one fire could make, however skilled the hands and however long the day. Demand grew faster than the hammer could answer. Plymouth wanted fittings in quantity. Shipwrights needed nails by the thousand. Builders grumbled about inconsistent supplies. Farmers complained of rising prices. War and peace alike consumed iron, only in different forms. And there was Eliza. There was always Eliza, though William tried not to place her name too close to ambition in his own mind, lest one contaminate the other and make both impossible. He closed the ledger with a snap. Matthew. His brother looked up from the bellows. I? Mind the forge. I shall be back before sundown. Matthew glanced toward the road with the expression younger brothers reserve for errands not explained. Greystone House. William looked at him. Matthew grinned. I said nothing. See that you continue. William took the mended kettle from the shelf, wrapped its handle in cloth, and set off. The path to Greystone House was one he knew in bone and boot. Though the Oxenhams now used it mostly as a summer residence while Yelmfield Manor was being finished and improved, Greystone remained the heart of William's memory. The pond lay beyond. The orchard still leaned into wind. The stone walls held the damp. The house seemed smaller now than when he and Thomas had been boys, but old places possess a stubborn kind of dignity. They do not need size when they have witnessed enough. As he approached the garden, he saw Eliza cutting herbs into a wicker basket. For a moment he stopped. She wore a plain gown suitable for garden work, sleeves lightly rolled, hair pinned but not perfectly, one lock fallen near her cheek. Sunlight moved through the apple leaves and set copper glints in her dark hair. She was not doing anything intended to inspire poetry. This made it worse. She looked up. William. Her face brightened. The old ache moved through him, familiar and foolish and powerful enough to make a man who commanded trip hammers forget how to hold a kettle. Good afternoon, Miss Oxenham. She lifted one brow. Must you be so formal? There may be ears in the parsley. The parsley is discreet. Force of habit, he said. She came to the gate. Mother is inside. You brought the kettle? Yes. Then come. She will be pleased, and you will be given tea whether you wish it or not. Inside, Anne Oxenham sat at the kitchen table copying figures into a household account book. Wealth had changed her surroundings more than her habits. New draperies hung at the windows. A finer porcelain tea service stood on a sideboard where earthenware had once sat. Better rugs covered parts of the floor. Yet Anne still kept accounts herself, still noticed waste, still stored string, and still possessed the terrifying ability to know when a young man had not eaten properly. She looked up and smiled. William, prompt as ever. He set down the kettle. The seam split near the base. I have reinforced it. It should hold now. Anne examined the work with practiced care. Excellent. Thank you, ma'am. Tea? I would not wish to impose. You have repaired my kettle. I shall repair your manners with tea. Eliza hid a smile. They sat. Conversation moved easily enough. Thomas's commission, the harvest. James's expected return from the Mediterranean. News from Plymouth. William answered when addressed and noticed, as he always noticed now, the subtle reserve in Anne's manner. It was not coldness. It was caution. The Oxenham's fortunes had risen swiftly. Captain James's share from the Spanish treasure ships had altered the family's standing across the district. Men who had once nodded now bowed. Invitations changed. Expectations shifted. Eliza, already admired, had become eligible in a way that made mothers of sons attentive and daughters of lesser prospects resentful. William felt the widening of the gulf more sharply because he had crossed the old one so often. Anne passed him a cup. And how fares your business? It prospers, ma'am. That is good to hear. In fact, I have been considering expansion beyond ordinary forge work. Eliza leaned forward at once. What sort? William hesitated. He had faced hot iron, injured horses, angry farmers, urgent shipwrights, and one drunken carter with a broken axle who believed shouting created engineering. None of them had looked at him as Eliza did now. I have been studying manufacturing methods used in the north, Sheffield, Birmingham, mechanized production. With water power and proper machines, certain goods can be made in far greater quantities and at lower cost. Anne's brows lifted. Ambitious. Yes, ma'am. Eliza's eyes sharpened. Nails? And fasteners, hinges, brackets, ship fittings eventually. But nails first. Demand is constant. He set down his cup. I have plans, calculations. I wondered whether you might look them over. Your figures are better than mine. Eliza glanced at Anne. Anne gave the smallest nod. Bring them to the parlour, Eliza said. Later, William spread his papers across the small parlour table. His drawings were careful but not elegant. His figures were better than he believed, though Eliza still found 3 errors before sitting fully down. She bent over the sheets with pencil in hand, brow furrowed, lips slightly pressed in concentration. William stood beside her, trying to watch the paper and failing. You propose mechanized nail production, she said. Yes. Using a water-powered trip hammer, rolling mill, and slitting mill. Yes. And then cutting rods into nails by machine. Where possible, some finishing by hand at first. She nodded. Demand. Every ship, building, cart, crate, gate, roof, and piece of furniture uses them. Hand-forged nails are slow and dear. Quality varies. Plymouth shipwrights alone consume thousands monthly. Eliza made a note. These equipment costs are low. I feared so. The water wheel mechanism especially, and you have not included training costs. Training? Workers do not become efficient because a machine has been purchased. They must learn rhythm, maintenance, safety, sequence. William stared at her. What? I spend my life around men who believe tools obey intention, she said. They usually obey practice. He smiled despite his nerves. That sounds like something Thomas would say. Thomas learned it from ships. I learned it from men. She adjusted columns, recalculated totals, added contingencies, labor costs, transport, coal storage, repairs, and a modest allowance for delay. At last she sat back. The premise is sound, but you need more capital than you estimate. How much? £180, not 100. William felt the number strike. That is a considerable sum. Yes. I can provide perhaps 100 from profits if I drain nearly everything. Then you require 80. From whom? Local gentlemen have little interest in iron unless shaped into gates with initials on them. Eliza looked at him. Ask me. William stared. You? I have money. That is not. Father has settled accounts for Thomas and me. Prize money, investments. Not as much as his own portion, of course, but substantial. Eliza, I cannot take your money. You would not take it. You would accept investment. No. Why? Because... He stopped. Because your father is Captain Oxenham. Because you are his daughter. Because I have loved you too long and have no right to bind you to risk. Because the world would laugh if it knew how often I imagine a life I have not earned. Because £80 from your hand would feel heavier than 800 from any other. Eliza stood. Because I am a woman? No. Because I do not understand the risk? No. Because you are proud? William looked away. That may be part of it. Good. Then set that part aside and address the business. He nearly laughed. She was merciless when correct. It is not only the money, he said. No? Your family's position has changed. Your father is wealthy. Thomas is a lieutenant. You are a person who can read accounts. You know what I mean? Yes. I know what society means. That is not the same as what I mean. William's hands tightened on the back of the chair. A blacksmith is no match for the daughter of a wealthy post-captain. Then become more than a blacksmith. The words struck cleanly. Eliza did not say it cruelly. That made it stronger. You have the vision, she continued. This plan proves it. Build it. And if I build it, then we shall see what stands. Silence gathered. Autumn light lay across the papers between them. Finally, William collected the sheets. I should return. Matthew will wonder what kept me. He knows. William looked at her. Eliza smiled. Younger brothers are rarely subtle. I will think on what you said. Do more than think. Recalculate. He bowed, almost formally. Thank you. As he walked back to the forge, the autumn sun sinking toward the horizon, William's mind moved faster than his feet. Eliza's confidence had set fire to something dangerous. Hope, perhaps. Not the soft, idle kind. A working hope. One with timber to cut, stones to lay, machines to build, accounts to balance, men to train, markets to secure, and a future to make large enough to stand inside. The forge came into view. Smoke rose from the chimney. Matthew looked up when William entered. Everything mended? William placed the papers on the workbench. We have planning to do. Matthew wiped his hands. We? Yes. William looked at the forge, at the single fire, the familiar anvil, the tools hanging in their places. It is time Rose Forge became something more. Over the following weeks, William refined the plan with the concentration of a man who had seen a door open and feared it might close if he blinked. Each evening, after the day's work ended and Matthew went home, William stayed by lamplight over drawings, figures, measurements, notes, and letters of inquiry. He studied everything he could learn of mills in Sheffield and Birmingham, nail machines, slitting mills, trip hammers, water wheels, belts, shafts, pulleys, and the temper of iron under repeated mechanical blows. A suitable site presented itself along a fast-flowing stream feeding toward the Yelm, a mile from the village, close enough to the road to Plymouth to make transport practical, and near enough to the forge that William could move between old work and new. He walked the land repeatedly, measured the stream's flow, calculated the fall, stood in mud with a rod and notebook, while Matthew complained that progress seemed to involve getting wet in several locations. William imagined the wheel there, the main building here, coal storage there, forge line, hammer, rolling mill, slitting mill, nail cutting, sorting room, packing, cart access, waste, drainage, fire risk. By day he worked the forge. By conversation he researched the market, and farmers told him what they paid for nails and how often they cursed their quality. Shipwrights in Plymouth needed quantities no village forge could supply. Builders wanted consistency. Wheelwrights wanted fittings that did not vary by mood. The war had driven prices up. Peace had increased building and trade. Demand sat waiting like a loaded cart. One crisp November morning, William arrived at Yelmfield Manor with his completed proposal bound in a plain leather portfolio. He had seen the estate from a distance before, but this was his first time coming as a caller on business. Yelmfield stood on its rise with grey stone softened by ivy, broad windows facing fields, and the distant gleam of the river Yelm. The gravel drive curved as if the house expected a rival to be admired. Smoke rose from chimneys. The garden had been ordered but not made vain. It was substantial, dignified, and to William faintly alarming. Eliza received him in the drawing-room. The room was bright, elegant, and warm. A large fireplace dominated one wall. Naval scenes hung in frames. Battles, ships under full sail, one engraving of the Nile in which Lorient exploded with more artistic enthusiasm than accuracy. William stood with his portfolio under one arm and felt every mark on his hands. "This is quite something," he said. "Father calls it modest." William looked around. "If this is modest, I should dislike to meet Pride." Eliza laughed. "You brought the plan?" He handed her the portfolio. Every detail I could account for. Land, building, machinery, labor, operations, markets. First 3 years of projections. She opened it. Her expression changed as she turned the pages. "This is remarkable." William stood silently while she read. He knew better than to speak during Eliza's first pass through numbers. Interruptions were treated like smudged ink. At last she looked up. "You revised the capital requirement?" £180. "And your contribution?" 100 from forge profits. "That leaves 80. "Yes. I will invest the balance." His heart thudded. "You are certain?" "Completely." "Eliza, this is a sound proposal. The market is real. The equipment costs now include proper contingencies. Your projected returns are ambitious but not foolish. Not foolish is praise." "In business, yes." He smiled despite himself. "What stake?" 40% for my investment and management contribution." William blinked. "You have calculated that already." "Of course. I was going to offer 30. "I know." "You are ruthless." "No, accurate." They looked at one another, and warmth moved beneath the business tone. Then Eliza said, "Have you spoken to father?" "He is still at sea." "Mother received a letter. He is expected within the fortnight." William's stomach tightened. "Then I should wait and present it properly." "Yes." "Will he approve?" Eliza closed the portfolio. "He respects ability. He respects courage. He respects thorough preparation." "That is not an answer." "It is the one you need." They finalized the arrangement in principle. Eliza would prepare her funds subject to Anne's approval as trustee. William would draft a partnership agreement. Formal execution would wait until James reviewed the proposal. At the garden gate, Eliza handed the portfolio back. "I am proud of you." William looked at her. The words struck deeper than investment. "What you are making is more than a business," she said. "It is a vision of the future." "The future is expensive. Most worthwhile things are." William carried those words back to the forge like banked fire. Captain James Oxenham returned to Newton Ferrers on a blustery December morning with Channel salt still in his coat and a Mediterranean brown in his face that made English winter seem personally offended. Yelmfield burst into movement. Anne ordered fires, food, linens, baths, unpacking, repacking, and a dozen comforts James claimed not to need and used gratefully. Eliza hovered just enough to be affectionate and not enough to be scolded. James gave carefully selected accounts of his recent service, omitting hardships with the instinct of a man long married to someone who heard omissions better than statements. William stayed away for 3 days. Family reunions were not business hours. On the 4th, a messenger brought a note from Eliza. "Father asks whether you might join us for dinner this evening. He is interested in hearing about your venture." William read it twice. Matthew watched him. "Bad news?" "Worse, dinner." Matthew grinned. "With the captain?" "Yes." "Wear the blue coat?" "I know what to wear." "Do you?" William looked at him. Matthew became fascinated by a horseshoe. William closed early, bathed thoroughly, scrubbed his hands until the water darkened twice, trimmed his nails, brushed his hair, and put on his best clothes. Dark blue coat, waistcoat, good linen, polished boots. The coat had been his father's, preserved for special days, and altered to fit William's broader shoulders. It was not fashionable, but it was respectable. At Yelmfield, Captain Oxenham greeted him warmly. "William, good to see you. Eliza tells me you have become an entrepreneur while I have been chasing Frenchmen. Hardly that, sir. Exploring possibilities. Possibilities are where fortunes begin. Come, we shall hear them over dinner. The meal was finer than William's usual fare by a margin that made him attentive to forks, yet the conversation remained unexpectedly easy. James asked after the forge. Anne asked after Matthew. Eliza asked no questions whose answers she already knew, which William appreciated. When the cloth was removed and port poured, James leaned back. Now, your manufacturing scheme. William opened the portfolio. The first sentences were the hardest. After that, the work spoke through him. He explained the limits of hand production, the demand for nails and fasteners, the opportunity offered by water power, the machinery, the production sequence, the site, transport, labor, market, risks, contingencies, and projected returns. James listened as he would have listened to an officer proposing a hazardous approach. No interruption unless needed. Questions placed precisely where weakness might hide. Water flow in dry summer, William answered. Machine maintenance, answered. Worker training, answered with a glance at Eliza, who did not smile but wanted to. Coal storage, revised location, sir. Fire risk, stone construction, separated stores, sand buckets, water access from the wheel race. Capital, £180. I provide 100. Eliza has offered 80, subject to approval. James's brows rose. He looked at his daughter. Has she? Eliza held his gaze. Yes, father. James looked back at William. Projected return, 15% first year, 25% by the third, if operations reach capacity. Optimistic. Conservative against full demand, sir. Optimistic only regarding execution. James's mouth twitched. A useful distinction. William waited. James closed the portfolio and placed both hands on it. Thorough, well considered. Risk remains, but risk always remains. Usually it hides best in plans that deny it. William's breath eased. Then James said, I must ask, this partnership with my daughter, purely business? The room changed. Anne's eyes moved to Eliza. Thomas was not there to choke on brandy, which was perhaps for the best. William felt heat rise up his neck. No, sir. James waited. It is not purely business. I have admired Eliza for years, loved her, if I may say so honestly, though I have not had the right to say so openly. Eliza's hands folded in her lap. James's expression revealed nothing. And you believe a factory makes you suitable? I believe character must be joined to provision, sir. Affection alone is not a house. James looked at him for a long moment. And what do you think Eliza's station is? William hesitated. Higher than mine. By money? By birth, education, expectation. Expectation is often a coward wearing society's coat. Anne looked at James then, and something private passed between them. James rose and walked to the window. When I was a young lieutenant, I fell in love with Anne Prowse. Her father was a respectable yeoman. Mine, a naval officer of modest means. Some thought the match irregular. Anne said dryly, Some still do, when bored. James smiled without turning. John Prowse judged me by character and prospects more than purse. He turned back. Do you imagine I would do less for my daughter? William's mouth had gone dry. No, sir. And I have known you since you were a boy, racing about with Thomas and giving my son ideas of navigation before either of you knew the word. I have seen you work, seen you stand by this family, seen you use opportunity rather than merely enjoy it. This venture confirms what I already knew. He returned to the table. Eliza's investment has my approval. William's relief was so strong he almost missed the next words. If it fails, the loss will be education, not calamity. See that it is at least well taught. Yes, sir. James raised his glass. To row manufacturing. They drank. Afterward, practical matters resumed. Land purchase, legal structure, timing, machinery, mill rights, building materials, insurance, worker contracts, accounts, and whether Eliza's name should appear openly in the partnership papers. Eliza insisted it should. James said society might find that unusual. Eliza said society would recover. Anne said society recovered better when profits were visible. William wisely said nothing. At the door, James walked him out. "One more thing." William stopped. "Yes, sir?" "If your intentions toward my daughter extend beyond partnership, you will approach me properly when the time comes." William met his gaze. "You have my word." "Good. Build your factory first. Show us what you are capable of." Walking home through winter dark, William felt the path ahead not easy, but clear. That was better than easy. Spring brought mud, birdsong, new shoots, thawing fields, and renewed work. Construction began in March along the stream. Foundation stones were laid first, heavy and square, set with more argument than ceremony. A millwright from Plymouth arrived, a compact man named Hesketh who distrusted all local measurements until he had taken them himself, and disliked William immediately for already having done the same. This became respect by the second week. Walls rose steadily in local stone. Large windows admitted light. The roof timbers went up under grey skies. The wheel pit was cut and lined. A main drive shaft ran the length of the building, with pulleys placed for future machines. William oversaw every detail, divided between old forge, new site, suppliers, workers, and Eliza's letters correcting expenditures before the ink had dried. The water wheel itself was 12 feet across, broad-bucketed, carefully angled to take full advantage of the drop. When first set in place, it looked enormous and oddly fragile. Then the water was admitted, the wheel turned, slowly at first, then with gathering grace. Wood creaked, water fell, the shaft moved. Inside, pulleys stirred. The building seemed to wake. Eliza visited often, not as ornament, not as indulgence, as partner. She walked the site with notebook and pencil, skirts lifted clear of mud with minimal sentiment. She tracked expenses, inventory, delays, commitments, and what she called unpriced optimism, which William learned was expensive. "The coal storage should be closer to the forge line," she said one afternoon, studying the layout. "It is safer farther away." "Yes, but your men will lose time carrying it. Place the main store there, smaller working store here, separated by stone." William looked. She was right. "Done. And that corner will bottleneck if two carts arrive together." "I thought of that." "Did you?" "I thought of it differently." "Incorrectly." "Temporarily." She smiled and made a note. By May, the main structure was complete, and machinery began to arrive. The trip hammer came first, a massive iron head attached to a wooden beam, lifted and dropped by cams on the turning shaft. When tested, it struck heated iron, with a force that shook the floor and made 3 men grin involuntarily. There is something in Englishmen that admires anything that hits hard in a regular fashion. The rolling mill followed, heavy rollers reducing thick bar to uniform strip. Then the slitting mill, blades set to cut sheet into narrow rods for nail making. Each machine required adjustment, cursing, oiling, rebuilding, further adjustment, and a small sacrifice of skin from William's knuckles. Throughout, the old forge continued. Matthew took on more of the routine work, growing into authority in his brother's shadow without resenting it too visibly. Jenkins, pensioned but not silent, visited the site frequently and offered criticism from a chair. "That bearing will heat. It is greased. It will heat greased. It has clearance. It will heat with clearance." Hesketh the millwright eventually said, "Does he ever praise?" William answered, "He has not left. That is praise." By midsummer, row manufacturing was ready, 6 workers hired, 2 skilled iron workers from Plymouth, 4 local men and boys with aptitude, good hands, and varying levels of common sense. William structured the process carefully. Heating, hammering, rolling, slitting, cutting, sorting, packing. Each man trained for specific tasks, with rotation enough to prevent ignorance from becoming habit. Eliza had insisted on this after noting that dependence on one skilled man made any business vulnerable to ail, injury, or marriage. The first full day began clear and bright. William arrived before sunrise. He stoked fires, checked belts, inspected the wheel, tested shaft alignment, walked the floor, and paused by the first box waiting for finished nails. Empty boxes are a challenge. Full ones are an argument won. The men arrived. The water was let through. The wheel turned. The shaft took motion. The trip hammer began its thunder. The factory lived. The day was imperfect. Of course it was. The trip hammer required adjustment. One belt slipped. The coal burned cooler than expected. One worker fed iron too slowly and another too fast. A batch warped in rolling. A boy dropped a tray and scattered half-finished nails across the floor like metallic hail. Jenkins, in his chair, observed that this was what came of enthusiasm. William ignored him, except when he was right. By evening, the first production lay sorted in wooden boxes, 2,416 nails, more than the old forge could have made in a month. William stood over them and felt something inside him go very still. Eliza arrived as the workers were leaving. Dust marked her hem from the road. She carried her ledger. Well? William led her to the box. 2,416. Her eyes widened. In one day? In a troublesome day. Tomorrow will be better. She picked up one nail and examined it. Uniform. Straight, clean-headed, sharp. Remarkable. The machine gives consistency, once properly set. And cost. Less than half hand-forged production. She looked up. So we can undersell while still profiting. We can. Her smile came slowly. Then, Mr. Rowe, we may have a business. We already had a business. We may have an industry. He laughed, the sound half disbelief. They walked through the quiet building together. The wheel continued to turn outside. Slower now, water falling steadily over its buckets. Evening light filled the long windows. The machines rested after their first day's labor, iron dark, wood warm. Belts slackened. William spoke of increasing output, shipyard contracts, additional nail sizes, hinges, brackets, perhaps agricultural fittings by autumn. Eliza answered with questions about inventories, delivery schedules, payment terms, depreciation, worker wages, and how soon they could afford a clerk. A clerk? Unless you intend to hammer by day and write invoices by night until you collapse. I have done worse. Yes, but we are building something better. They reached the doorway. Summer evening spread gold across the yard. The stream shone beyond the wheel. Smoke from the old forge drifted faintly above the trees. Eliza turned to him. You have built something remarkable. We built it. The vision was yours. You made it possible. Thomas made it possible. William shook his head. Thomas gave me a beginning. You gave it shape. For once, Eliza did not answer quickly. The silence between them was no longer awkward. It had become a place both knew. Eliza, William began. He stopped. Her eyes held his. He remembered James's condition. Build your factory first. Show us what you are capable of. He looked back into the workshop, where 2,416 nails lay in rows, small iron witnesses to a first step. I hope this is only the beginning, he said. For the business? Yes. Her smile widened, knowing and kind enough to be dangerous. I look forward to exploring what comes next. With me? He asked before caution could stop him. With you, she said. They walked back toward the village under the softening light, speaking of orders, coal, machines, buyers, and all the practical matters by which people conceal larger hopes, until those hopes can safely stand on their own feet. Behind them the water wheel turned, steady, patient, power drawn from a stream that had flowed long before William Rowe imagined a factory, and would flow long after if tended well. The sound carried into evening wood, water, iron, motion. A new heartbeat for Newton Ferrers.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.